Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoya here from the Soonerscoop.com studios. Josh McCuistion down in Houston HQ Scoop Studios. That's tough to say. We haven't done this in a minute.
I know.
We haven't had the gang back together. But Josh, another busy week ahead as we enter what is camp season for the University of Oklahoma. Brent Venables football camp coming up on Thursday this week. We'll get to some of that stuff here in a little bit. We got to go back about a week and a half, though, because you have been up in Oklahoma on the spring tour and stopped by Owasso to see Taj Overton, the 2026 Oklahoma defensive tackle, offer a guy that we've talked about here on the program before. What was it like seeing him as he goes into his junior season?
Yeah, Taj is a guy that I saw last spring, but it was kind of like keep an eye on him. Let's see where he goes. But there was, people were definitely excited about him. But seeing him this year, you're like, okay, now you know why everyone was so, ready to kind of let him loose. And guys, he's a dominant force. There's just no other way to put it. He's very active. Does he know I'm there and probably maybe got a little extra juice on some of that? Sure. Yeah, that happens. And there was, more importantly than me by far, there was a whole bunch of coaches there as well. So, I think he was probably having a pretty good day, but he's a guy, about 6'2", probably 275, 280 right now, going against, I've said it over and over again, Owasso's offensive line is outstanding, and he's giving those guys trouble. He's making moves and, really just a very athletic interior player that I think could really be one of those three techniques that can play at 300 pounds but still be able to get upfield and be dangerous.
Josh, looking at his RPM here on three, it doesn't look like he's got a ton of interest from some bigger schools, but do you think this is a guy that you could see starting to get some of that momentum, especially with the way Oklahoma's recruiting him? I know Oklahoma State has recruited him as well, Arkansas. Do you think that he will kind of pick up some steam in the recruiting circles, considering he is going, he's only a 2026 guy?
Yeah. And I should say, when you look at that, it's easy because On Three will organize it by, most likely prediction and things like that. If you go down, you can see Tennessee, Texas, Auburn, he's got some bigger offers, but you're absolutely right that, the Alabamas, the Georgias, stuff like that. He may have to wait a little while on some of those, but I do think you're seeing he's kind of an embodiment of where recruiting's starting to go with Oklahoma, becoming part of the SEC. You're seeing more and more schools take interest in the state, saying, hey, you can play against Oklahoma, you can, play against Texas. All these schools that you're familiar with are going to be on our schedule in these next few years. So I think you'll still see him continue to pick up some momentum, but I would say probably by, the end of his senior year, you're talking about a probably top 12, top 15 defensive tackle in the country. He's going to continue to, emerge, I guess you would say.
That was going to kind of be my next question he looks very young, looks like still has the development stage ahead of him. Not a surprise being basically coming out of his sophomore season. But when you start talking about some of the better defensive linemen that have come out of the state, where would he kind of match up with some of those names? Like on a scale of GK to, on down?
Yeah, as you go through the list, and now some of that, you have to be honest, it's kind of Gerald McCoy and then everybody else.
Sure.
There's clearly a line of delineation. Yeah. Gerald's, we all know what he was and who he is. But I would say he's in that next, if you told me 2 years from now, he's number two, I could completely see that as being a possibility. You look at some of the other guys, at Jinx, you got Ashton Henderson and Tony Gillespie that were really, really good players. You just kind of move around the state and you can find Stacy McGee at Muskogee was obviously a really good one and had a really nice NFL career. So there are good players, but I don't think there's anybody that his talent couldn't overcome, that was such a great high school player. So, doing this for 20 years, I'm sure there's somebody I'm probably forgetting that maybe deserves a little more credit than I'm currently giving them. But there's such a big step from number one to number two that I think he could move into that range. And he and GK are just very different players. Like I said, Gerald was a 3 technique, but Taj is a guy that's going to win with leverage a lot of times. GK was going to win with, quickness, length, some of those kind of things. And I think Overton moves really well as well, but he just kind of has a different way of having success than McCoy did.
In terms of a relationship with Todd Bates and all that kind of stuff, any type of update just in terms of, and it's so early for him even, just the continued, I would imagine, building of a relationship or the recruitment of him?
Absolutely. I mean, you can tell that Todd Bates, and again, for everybody at home, he can't have full contact with Oklahoma yet. They can't really get active with him until August 1st, and that's when the window kind of really, that's when these guys become full-on recruits. They're going through the process, and they can have the same recruiting periods as the seniors and those kind of things. So August 1st comes, he'll absolutely be a priority for Oklahoma. We all know what Brent Venables and just the entire staff has put in to in-state recruiting. So they'll make him a real priority. But I think there's a good early relationship for what limitations they do have to deal with right now. You can tell that Taj is a kind of a quiet guy, kind of kept to himself, at least, in interviews and the times I've had a chance to talk with him. But you can tell Todd Bates really connects with him kind of on a fatherly level. There's a real, just an easy kind of comfort between the two of them. And I think that's obviously likely to grow as time goes on.
Josh, just real quick before we get to some of these other guys that we want to talk about, Taj is obviously going to be a priority being an in-state guy and that defensive line. And we talk all the time about building that defensive line room up. Who are maybe some other guys, just real quick, in the 2026 class on that defensive line that could end up being targets for Oklahoma?
I have to pull it up because I get into these and then I talk about it. I'm like, oh, I'm going to forget somebody. So I inevitably will. What I will say is I don't think like this year where we, 2 years ago, it was very obvious, like we all knew, David Stone, Zadavian Sims at different points, Nigel Smith, like we all kind of knew. This year, in 2026, I don't think there are the obvious answers. Like, and you're seeing it in a lot of what Oklahoma is doing. Like, there's a lot of offers in Florida, Georgia, those kind of distant places. And some of that is just the way recruiting works. You tend to offer guys farther away, and then you kind of get a feel for your more regional guys because those are the guys that you're just frankly more likely to land. But I think one of the names that I would really gravitate toward, and I continue to hear Oklahoma's kind of building momentum, is Kevin Ford at Duncanville. Oklahoma offered him right before the spring game. He came up for the spring game. He's been up again since then. They offered him before, I think it was the Heisman Hangout. And then he came to the Heisman Hangout, and then he came again for the spring game. I kind of expect him to show up at some point here in June. And you talk to people, it's a guy, 2026 defensive end from Duncanville. You talk to people around him, and I think Oklahoma and A&M are in a pretty serious dogfight at the moment for kind of who's at the top of his list. So that's a guy to watch. They're also recruiting his good friend Zach Turner at Duncanville, and I think that's really the fact that those two could play together, I think has them maybe a little more interested, and not Turner's got plenty of good options as well, but I think he really likes Oklahoma as well. So that's kind of working in their favor. As far as, like I said, going down the list here and trying to find anybody else that really sticks out, one that I will say is going to be, we saw him in the spring at the Dallas Under Armour, Eddie, is Anthony Kennedy, the big defensive lineman from Little Rock, Arkansas. He's going to camp this summer. So obviously Oklahoma is, getting a closer look at him. And then we'll kind of know, like, are they ready to really push for him? Because he's a really good, impressive athlete. But when we saw him at camp, you're like, okay, there's a long way to go as far as his development and just becoming the kind of guy that you say, oh, yeah, no doubt Oklahoma's going to zero in on him. So I think it's just a matter of them wanting to size him up, kind of see, are these things we can fix? And if so, then I would expect Oklahoma to move forward with him as well.
Seems like it's going to be a pretty active next couple months, and especially leading in, obviously, into this next football season, into the 2024 football season, to see who Oklahoma really kind of starts to identify in that junior class. Moving over from Owasso to Bixby, You went up to the Bixby team camp at the end of last week. A host of guys. Edmond Memorial was up there with 2025 Kansas quarterback commit David McCombs. We talked about him last week during the recruiting report as maybe one of the guys that sometimes gets lost in that mix of exceptional 2025 signal callers inside of the state. Let's just start there, and then we'll kind of work our way into some of the Bixby guys as, believe it or not, the Spartans are loaded again, and maybe even more so with some major D1 talent in the waiting in the wings. But David McCombs, you said that he had a really good day up there at the Bixby team camp for the Edmond Memorial.
Yeah, that was a perfect lead in, Eddie, because I thought the most probably fun, interesting thing I saw on the day was a little team, live team stuff that Bixby and Edmond Memorial did for about 20, 30 minutes. And I certainly am not going to say Edmond Memorial is ready to go play with Bixby, but they were given as good as they got in that little scrimmage. Like they've got some guys on their defensive front that are real active. And when you have a guy like David McComb, he can fix a lot of problems. When I saw David as a sophomore, I thought at times he was a little he's been trained and coached since he was a young guy, and I thought at times he looked almost a little robotic. But as I watch him more and more, I don't know if he's just kind of developed a comfort with the system or, I don't know what it is, but he just looks like a little different guy and is a little bit better each time I watch him. And I know that's something I say a lot, but I do. I see the improvement from David McComb. And he threw some beautiful deep balls. One to Billy McDown, a receiver at Edmond Memorial, 2025 guy that I think has a chance to maybe be a TU, North Texas kind of guy. Has some nice speed. And so, again, with McComb, very, very fundamentally sound, very much going to, be repetitive with his motion, do all those little things that you need to do. And then on top of that, like I said, it has some natural feel for kind of downfield touch.
Josh, OU has its quarterback in Kevin Sperry. Now, wait, McComb's 2025, right? Yeah, 2025.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
OU has their quarterback, Kevin Sperry. Have they talked at all to McComb? Would there be any interest there? I know he's committed to Kansas, but...
No, they're obviously with the quarterback group that is in state. I mean, we've talked about it before. McComb at Edmond Memorial, Grady Adamson at Deer Creek, that Eddie and I are huge fans of. Jamarian Ficklin at Muskogee, who just has maybe the most unique skill set of all the guys involved. And then obviously Shaker Isaac, who everybody's known since he was a freshman. When he won a state title at Jinx and now has made the move over to Union. I think if Oklahoma was going to look in any direction, my impression has been that it might be Jamarian Ficklin. I think Seth Luttrell likes the athleticism he brings. And, they're Muskogee bros. Like, there's got to be a little love there. So I think that's some of it. But to me, again, OU seems very happy with Kevin Sperry, obviously a really talented guy. And I think this year could be interesting for Kevin and just watching him as part of an offense that maybe is a little more vertical and downfield than what we knew Carl Albert was going to be last year with Xavier Robinson, as their running back. They built their offense around their bell cow, and obviously it paid off in a state title.
One of the, I think, good things about getting out and seeing some of these guys during the spring is being able to kind of see some of the new guys or maybe some new faces or some guys that maybe we didn't really know a whole lot about. It sounds like Jordan Kreitz, a 2026 edge from Edmond Memorial, teammate of David McCombs, could maybe fit that bill as, okay, let's see what this is over the next couple years.
100%. I mean, this is a guy, and guys, I'll be perfectly honest. There's some guys I show up to camps like these, and I'm like, okay, I want to see this guy, and we'll get into a couple of those guys for Bixby here in a moment. But with Kreitz, you could have told me his name walking in and I would have had no idea. And this is a guy that was at the Houston Under Armour camp a couple of months ago and just, wasn't on my radar. It wasn't a guy I was watching closely. But seeing him in this setting, guys, he's 6'5" and a half, 6'6", and I think the coaches told me the last they measured him, it was like 240. And this is a big, big human being. But you watch him in some of the tape, and, he's long and lean. Like, I mean, that's a guy that could carry 270 in his sleep. I mean, you see him in this stuff and watch him set the edge. He kind of is one of those guys, and I think I went in and I was like, oh, he's interesting. But you look at him and you're like, oh, he's a power forward that they just managed to talk into come playing football. But you watch him. I mean, that's Broderick Scholl right there, 79. that he's lined up against. And I don't know if I've got any clips here where you can see him go against Scholl, but he had some where he did, and he physically held up just fine. There was no problem there. So again, I really like his traits. I like his physicality. I came in not expecting anything, and then kind of every time I would set a new bar for him in my head, like, well, let's see what he does when they run at him. He wouldn't fold. Like, okay, that's him look at him, just shock Scholl with his hands. It's nothing. I mean, I'm not knocking Scholl or anything like that, but like, there's more there than like, oh, this guy played basketball, like there's something there that I like. And, looking over some of his measurables, I think he ran right around, like 5 flat at one of the Under Armour camps. And I know people will try to knock that, but as a high school guy that has no idea what he's doing and running lasers, 6'6", 240 and running those kind of times, I'm interested. So, again, very traitsy. It's a lot more about what he could be than what he is right now. But he's one of those pieces, like I was talking about with Edmond Memorial. I think this is going to be an improved football team. I was impressed with what I saw from them.
Josh, I think you nailed it. Just watching him here, his frame is certainly one that you can build around. He could obviously put on some more weight. And it seems like, Josh, and correct me if I'm wrong, Miguel Chavis has a type, and this guy, just based on his physical traits, he likes to recruit guys, obviously, that have high-end talent, but just the ceilings are a lot higher, and maybe they're a little bit more raw, maybe guys that he can develop. I mean, does he kind of fit what Chavis is looking for? And I think he also, I don't know how much you got to talk to him, Josh, but Chavis also clearly has a type in terms of personality and the way that he connects with certain guys. Do you think he maybe fits that kind of a player?
I would not say that he is the, like rah, screaming at everybody type of guy that we would normally say that's a Miguel Chavis guy. But I do think he's very much a look you in the eye, yes, sir, no, sir. Like, I think on that level, there's going to be some connection. It's not the deal where, because we've heard Brent in particular talk about those kind of guys. Like, we want the guy that's going to connect with us and going to have that, going to give us that feeling of he's taking in what we're talking to him about. I think he's very much that kind of kid. And I only talked to him for a couple of minutes, so I'm not trying to say I know him and his whole background. But if Oklahoma likes the talent, I could 100% see him being a fit from a mental standpoint. Now, it's important to say, because people out there are going to be like, well, tell us more. The guy, I know very little beyond what I saw on this day. So I don't want everybody to say, Josh saying, he's going to offer this kid. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying he is a physical guy that has some impressive traits. And let's see where it goes. If you happen to catch that Memorial game, I bet he pops out to you. I bet you notice him.
Yeah, and I think going off that, not just this kid, obviously, but like to the greater point of the kids they recruit. I mean, PJ wasn't a rah guy. He's a yes sir, no sir type of guy. So like I think that I didn't want to make it sound like they only recruit like these certain type of personality guys, but like I just there is a connection there with Chavis and a lot of these players that you see.
That was going to be one of my questions, Josh, and I think you might have answered it. But is he an Edmond kid? Kind of seems like he's come out of nowhere.
That my understanding is that he is an Edmond kid. Okay. I could find nothing about him, like, he's a move-in or something like that. Because the guy I mentioned earlier, the Billy McDowell kid, the receiver, he started at Carl Albert. He was there as a sophomore. And, one of those moments where we're like, everybody hates the transfers. Billy McDowell was stuck behind Tristan Haynes and Trinae Washington and all those other guys. He goes over to Edmond Memorial, and he's the guy. So, like, that worked out for everybody. No, I'm sure Mike Dunn would love to have Billy McDowell on his roster, but like it's better for the kid. Like you get it. It makes sense. But no, as far as I know, this kid is just he's just an Edmond kid. Like, sure. I don't know if maybe we're talking David Robinson growth spurt here or what it is, but I do know from the impression I got talking to a couple of the staffers is that he'd put on a pretty good amount of weight, like maybe 25, pounds over the last year or so, and that's really kind of changed his game a little bit.
Maybe maybe an Edmond Central kid, maybe a Sequoia. Alcott, I think, is up there as well. That's my extent of middle schools in the Edmond area.
I don't know anything.
We played Sequoia when I was in high school. Yeah,
I think we always
all right. Sorry, I didn't play him in high school.
I think we played. Well, yeah, middle school. The Western. Yeah. I didn't miss a Western Oaks Edmond Sequoia matchup in the mid-90s.
All I know about Edmond Memorial is they have a very good volleyball team.
Oh.
Because I remember Bishop Kelly would always play them in volleyball in the state tournament.
How would they do?
Lose, because Bishop Kelly was the best in volleyball.
They played 6A?
Bishop Kelly did.
Volleyball?
They got moved up to 6A in volleyball because they won state so many times.
It's good to have at least some of you up here with
volleyball and academic bowl was Bishop Kelly's
I don't think we
go-to. And soccer.
I don't know if Eddie's friends at Heritage Hall just heard that, but I'm pretty sure he's saying Hall needs to move up. I think that's what he just said. We're going to report that.
They'd be more than ready to. I can guarantee you that. Brett's already drawn stuff up for this year. All right, let's get to the Bixby, the host of Bixby, guys. Obviously, Bixby's one of the more dominant powers in the state of Oklahoma. What Lauren Montgomery's been able to do, over the better part of the last 10 years now. I know that we were talking about that last week, how it's kind of crazy that this dominant run has been almost a decade now for Bixby as they made the move up to 6A1. No problem last year. This year, though, it seems like we're starting to see more and more top-level Power 5 type guys coming out of the Spartan program. Let's just run it all the way down, and then we can get into the particulars. Blake Hogster, 2025 wide receiver, 2025 offensive tackle. Broderick Scholl, who is certainly somebody that is of interest in terms of talking about Oklahoma and what they need to do in the 2025 class on the offensive line. 2026 linebacker Cord Nolan, who I was telling you before we got going here, Josh, feels like he's been at Bixby for maybe the last decade as well. And then a new name, Caden Penny, a 2027 offensive lineman for Bixby. That let's start there. Let's just start right out of the chute with Caden Penny, who somebody that you came back and kind of raving about.
Yeah, I couldn't be more excited about Caden Penny. And what's interesting is when I had talked to people about him, you were hearing stuff about him very young, like keep an eye on this kid at Bixby. He's going to be special, blah, blah, blah. And the two things that were, I guess, left out, everybody was talking to me about defensive line. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's my personal love for offensive line play. I saw him playing left tackle for about 10 seconds, and you were like, I don't want to move him anywhere away from there. That guy he slides his feet like a college guy. Like it was really, really impressive at about, 6'3", 6'4", probably 255 right now. Again, kid just ending his freshman year of high school. This is a big, impressive athlete. But he'll start for Bixby next year. I'd about bet money on it. He'll be their starting left tackle over, Scholl, who's going to be the right tackle. So again, that may be Scholl's already over there. We're just going to leave him there. There's a million reasons. I don't want people to read too much into that, but it tells you how good Caden Penny is, how much comfort they have with him. He can play defensive line. I mean, I watched him do that too, and he's athletic and he can do some stuff, but I'm going to fight somebody who doesn't want him on the offensive line. That's just the way that goes. But yeah, he is. I would say if he's not the next 2027 in-state offer, he'll be among the next couple for Oklahoma. He is a special dude, no doubt about it.
I was just about to say, Josh, I know it's early in his recruitment, 2027 kid, but it sounds like OU's pretty interested in him.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, there was a lot made of Bill Beedenbow, and I believe he was with Brandon Hall going up to the Bixby practice. And again, a lot of that was just making the rounds, doing the things you have to do. Obviously, if you're at OU, you got to get by Bixby. Like just every spring, you need to be there. And I think a lot of people just assumed, it's about Broderick Scholl. And to a degree, sure, it was. Getting a look at him, seeing if kind of what they had in their head, what their evaluation is, what they think they should do going forward is matching up with what they see when they go watch in practice. The other side of that coin, I guess, pardon the pun, that really wasn't intended, is seeing Caden Penny and getting a look at him. I know they're very aware of him. They were very impressed. The staff as a whole. Again, if he camps at Oklahoma, I have a lot of trouble believing he wouldn't leave Norman with an offer.
In terms of Broderick Scholl, you just mentioned him, a name that, I think people that have watched the program before, have kind of followed what Oklahoma's doing on the recruiting trail in the offensive line group in that 2025 class. I I don't want to say, like, has there been any movement, because obviously there hasn't been with some of the top targets that Oklahoma's going after. But just in terms of Oklahoma going up to see him, it seems like they're keeping at least an open type of communication if that were to come to that phase.
Yeah, I don't think Oklahoma has ever been like, well, we're just not interested, brother.
Right.
But at the same time, I think they're being very honest. Like there's just some other guys we're more focused on. And like we've talked about, Eddie, I think people are like, well, he's from Oklahoma. They should have offered him, and he's highly regarded, and, all this other stuff. His recruiting is kind of interesting. Like Oklahoma State hasn't offered him either. There are several schools that you would think would be heavily involved here that just really aren't. And I don't have a good explanation for that, because when I watch him, I see a big, super athletic, really talented kid. Still raw, still learning the position. I think maybe when he showed up to Bixby, he had spent maybe more time as a defensive lineman than on the offensive line. So I think that's some of it. But don't get me wrong. Like from my impression, Oklahoma is very comfortable that he is a talented guy that in most years they would offer. I think they don't want anything to interrupt their pursuit of the guys we've talked over and over about, that I'll spare everybody listening once again. But yeah, again, with Scholl, they like him. He's talented. There's no question on anybody's part. I just think they want to keep their focus, and I think they know at this point, offering him, I think it would be read as probably desperation. A lot of OU fans would immediately say, oh, it means they lost out on this guy, which probably isn't what it is. But I think it would be read that way, and the upside is minimal, because this isn't an Oklahoma kid that grew up dreaming of playing for Oklahoma. He moved to Bixby literally like a year ago, almost to the day. So I just don't think there would be much payoff, and there are potential pitfalls in doing so.
He is ranked the 13th overall offensive tackle in the country by On3, 149th player overall, third player in Oklahoma. So obviously very highly rated. I think it says here Auburn, A&M, Nebraska, Texas Tech, some of the teams going after him. But Josh, I mean, you kind of just hit on it, but like, would he be kind of that a backup option if they can't land some of these big guys?
He could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, he could be. What I will say, and to kind of tread, we're bouncing back and forth between North and South Tulsa here. The guy that I think makes a lot of sense in that role is Blake Cherry. And people will say, well, he committed to Arkansas. There's not a terrible commitment for Oklahoma, because if things go like we think they might at Arkansas this year, and you see what happens with Sam Pittman and it goes off the rails, Blake Cherry is a kid that grew up in Oklahoma. He does, like, an OU offer would mean something to him, even if he might be a little sore, okay, it took too long or whatever. But Oklahoma has had some communication with Blake Cherry. He's a guy that makes more sense to me, because, again, even if they offer Broderick Scholl, I don't think Oklahoma has any special in-state advantage or does anything like that. With Blake Cherry, I think it's a different scenario. So, again, that's the thing you have to factor in here if you're going to go that route. And again, guys, I think they should take 3 tackles. It kind of feels like they're not going to say they would obviously take 3 if it's Ryan Foje and any 2 of the 4 we've talked over and over again about. But if they only were to get 1, that's where it gets interesting. Like, do they feel the need that they have to have 3, or is it more of it's got to be the right 3? And I don't have that answer just yet. And I think probably in about a month's time, we'll start to get some clarity on that.
Blake Hogshooter, it sounds like a 2025 wide receiver, tight end. Kind of, is it basically a combo? Is that something in terms of what's he going to grow into? Didn't probably necessarily have the biggest day when you were up there, but it sounded like he had a really big Bixby team camp.
Yeah, that's the thing. So, Eddie, you were talking about Lauren Montgomery and all the success he's had. I can tell you, I have rarely seen a coaching staff more frustrated during a spring practice than they were. But, like, at the same time, Lauren is so zen-like all the time. Like, you never see him just flying off the handle. But, like, I was sitting next to him and we're talking about a few players and just kind of what's going on in his life, what's going on in mine, that kind of stuff. And we're watching practice go on, and I can feel it. Like, I can feel he's like, this is not going the way I want it to, and I'm not happy about it. But at no point does he lose his cool. And then I kind of am around the huddle after practice and still just very calm, very collected. But within that, Blake Hogshooter didn't have it like it, and it wasn't so much like he had a bad day. They were having some trouble with pressure. The offensive line was having some problems, which is a strange thing to say after listing 2 tackles that I'm really excited about. But they weren't having a great day. And so I think quarterback was under a lot of pressure. They weren't getting to throw the ball down the field the way they wanted to. Now I heard the next day they came back and they gave some people some trouble. And I know Blake Hogshooter went to the SMU mega camp this weekend and got offered by like North Texas and I think UTSA or somebody along those lines. But you talk to some people at Bixby and they'll tell you he's a Power 5 guy, like all day, every day. They're very confident in him. So I kind of want to see where his recruitment goes, and I want to watch him some more. Like I said, I saw him moving around. He's 6'3", 6'4". I mean, he's a big, long, athletic kid. I don't know if he's ever going to be like a pure tight end. He'd have to kind of be a flex. But again, there's some skills there to work with.
2026 linebacker, as we mentioned, it seems like he's been there for like literally the last 10 years during this dynasty run for the Spartans. Cord Noland, a linebacker for the Bixby Spartan team that, again, it seems like every year we've talked about Cord Noland, but he's just entering his senior year. Or excuse me, his junior year.
Yeah, his junior year, yeah, absolutely. Now, Cord is, again, to kind of talk about how the thing has moved. I remember talking to coaches in like the mid 2000s, early 2010s, and they would talk about jinx, having these players that they're not the biggest guys, they're not they're not these physical marvels, but they are so good, they're so tough, they get them lined up right, they always know where they're supposed to be, and they've been playing in that defense since they were 8 years old. And Cord is that like a little bit bigger. Like he's a little more athletic. He's a little bit bigger. He's very physical. But man, you talk about a dude that has the mentality of a Mike linebacker. Cord Noland wants to mix it up with everybody. Like, and I mean, not like in a bad way, but he's just not going to back down from anything. Like, as the practice went on, few teams start chirping, including East St. Louis, who, guys, I'm not messing with those dudes. I mean, and I'm not like, they are big. I mean, East St. Louis, it's hard for people that don't see high school football every day to like. I was talking to Kirk Frederick at Tulsa Union's head coach, and he goes, "Can you believe how big those dudes are? This is Tulsa Union. Like, I mean, he knows what big, impressive athletes look like, and East St. Louis is they're monsters." And they start chirping a little bit, and you better believe Cord Noland's right there in the middle of it. Like, I mean, he's ready to go, and I just love his mentality. I love the way he plays the position. I remember watching him. Like I think he played a little bit of varsity late in some games as a freshman in his freshman year, and that's when I first saw him. And you were just like, man, like I don't know if this kid's big enough, but man, he's really good. And he's grown a little bit. He's kind of filling out. He's not going to be the fit for everybody because he's probably 5'11", right in that ballpark. But somebody's going to get a really, really good football player.
Do you think OU would get involved, Josh?
He's the kind of guy like, and at that position, we know like Brent falls in love with guys sometimes. And, I'm sure Zach Alley to a degree is the same. I know Cord is going to camp at OU this summer. And I know, he talked to him when they came by this spring. So I wouldn't rule it out. I think it's probably unlikely just because I think they're going to hope to get a guy that's a little, checks a few more of the physical boxes. But it's not impossible. Like, I mean, again, he's got some range. He sees it really well. Like, he is we were talking earlier about, a Miguel Chavis kind of guy. Well, we know a Miguel Chavis guy is basically a Brent Venables kind of guy. Cord Noland's a Brent Venables kind of guy. Like, he runs hot. He's got an attitude to him. Like, but he's smart. He not like to the point of foolish. He plays football the way Brent Venables would want a guy to play football.
It'll be interesting. Just in terms of wrapping up everything from the Bixby camp, you mentioned Coach Fred, Shaker Reesig over at Tulsa Union, a Utah quarterback commitment, as well as another guy that we, speaking of guys that we saw at the Under Armour camps, Cason Delgado, who's a 2027 quarterback, still rather young, probably going to be waiting in the wings behind Reesig. What'd you make of both of them, as well as Ashton Cunningham, the cornerback from Union?
Yeah. It's so cliche, but hey, Union's really talented again. Like it's just
Imagine that.
the wheel never stops. Yeah. So, with Shaker and Cason split a lot of snaps. So I don't know that you ever got a great feel for where any of it was. I thought Shaker clearly had the better day, and yeah, as you'd expect from a guy going to be a senior headed to Utah, all that stuff. I thought he threw the ball around really well. He looks as comfortable as I've seen him in a couple of years at Union. I don't know if, just an on day or what it was, but I thought he delivered some really nice balls. When I notice him, I think it's really working over the middle. Like he has some confidence there that I think some younger quarterbacks maybe don't. I don't know if that's because he's been playing so long. I don't know if that's the success he had as a young guy. There's a lot of answers to it. But again, I just like the way he works between the hashes. I think there's a lot to his game there. Cason Delgado, a little rougher day. I think there was a lot of he saw some pressure. It was kind of being forced to move around. And, I think when I watched him a lot, they were going against East St. Louis, and East St. Louis has some big-time DBs, so he's thrown into some tighter windows than maybe he's accustomed to. But again, still a really talented kid. He'll be fine. He just needs some time. And then with Ashton Cunningham, I don't often get a chance to just talk about Oklahoma Preps guys that I just love. Ashton Cunningham's that guy. Again, you talk about a guy that plays football the way you want football to be played. Ashton Cunningham's that dude. He's about 5'10", he's about 170, and he will light you up if he gets a chance. He is plays with a reckless abandon that OU fans might, connect to a former number 7, like that kind of just energy to the way he plays. And at the same time, he finished second in the state last year on the 100-meter. Just got beat out by Caleb Barnett, who's at Jinx now. I think he ran 10.6.2 or something like that in the state final. So, he can absolutely go. So, again, I think he's a guy that right now people aren't talking about. I think I put him in my state rankings at like number 10 or 11, and I'm not sure he's got a Division I offer right now, but I don't care. I love the guy, just watching him play.
It's shocking to me to find out that Tulsa Union, Jinx, and Bixby are all going to be battling it out for the top spot in 6A.
Well, it seems like
year.
Bixby too. Bixby always has good players, but it seems like they have more
it's
Division
different.
I guys.
It seems different than in past years.
Yeah,
no doubt about it. That's
they don't
good.
have the sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say they don't have the experience we're used to Bixby had, because it felt like for 10 years somehow Bixby was always experienced. It was weird that way. This is the first year, and talking to, give a shout out to our buddy Michael Knight, some of the guys that really know Tulsa high school football. And he was, you talk to him and they're like, this is the first year where it feels like if the right team came along, maybe they could get Bixby. Maybe they could catch them. And you're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And that's what I see. But at the same time, some of the young talent that's coming, you're like, I haven't seen young talent like this at Bixby before. So it's a really interesting kind of balancing scale between those two ideas.
It's kind of amazing to hear that, being an Oklahoma guy like both of you guys are, and just growing up, it was always Jinx Union.
Yep.
Nobody. And over the last 4 or 5 years, I think you can officially say, as they made that jump up, didn't have a problem with the jump, Bixby's kind of become that top dog right now. And there is no doubt about it. And from a program standpoint, like we said at the top, what Lauren Montgomery's been able to do is it really is unbelievable. He's done an exceptional job. Very good. That's kind of the spring tour wrap up, just in terms of all the team camps you were able to go see. You'll be headed back up to the state of Oklahoma this week. First week of Brent Venables football camp, which, I think has been really good over the last couple of years. We've been able to see a number of guys that, certainly camped. I'd go back to last summer with Kevin Sperry and basically him just kind of living in Norman and working out through every session. Sounds like there's going to be a good group of quarterbacks coming up on Thursday.
Yeah, this should be a pretty interesting group. I know that Darian Coleman, the quarterback, the 2026 quarterback from Florida, will be on campus really from Wednesday to Friday. Now, maybe it was Wednesday. I'm sorry, Thursday to Saturday. I don't know why I said Wednesday. Thursday to Saturday. Now, I don't know if he's going to work at both days of camp, and he kind of didn't know that either. I think he kind of wanted to. He'll probably work Thursday the 6th, and then if it's deemed he still needs to, or if he just wants to, then he'll go back out Saturday. The other guy I'm expecting on June 6th. Now, I haven't been able to confirm with him, but he told me, I think, about 3 weeks ago that he would be there, was Jonas Williams, who picked up an OU offer also in that 2026 class about a month ago now, I guess. He is supposed to be there too. So potentially having those two throwing side by side, getting a good feel for it, that's got to be perfect for Seth Luttrell, kind of gets to size him up. And then literally a week to the day, Jaden O'Neal from California is going to come in. So we're going to get a chance to see a lot of the big-time quarterbacks. And, it's obviously, like you were alluding to, Eddie, it starts off on Thursday in a really big way.
Zane Rose headed up. Is he going to be working out on Thursday as well? Getting another look at the 2027 Oklahoma commit.
Maybe Kevin Sperry, being at Geyer now, kind of got under, I don't know. Maybe he spoke to him. But Zane Rowe is supposed to work out both Thursday and Saturday. He's going to work out both the days of camp. He's supposed to be there. And I couldn't be more excited because, like I said, and I know, I guess I didn't say it, like we were talking about before we got started, I'm expecting this to be a really good O-line group. So he's going to work exclusively at defensive end with Miguel Chavis, and watching him go against some of these big-time offensive linemen that I'm sure we're going to talk about is going to be pretty exciting.
In terms of the offensive linemen, Felix Ojo's a name that I think Oklahoma fans would be familiar with. Who else in that group coming up this week that you're excited to see?
Yeah, Felix Ojo.
And full disclosure, you've sent me the list. There's a couple of these kids' names I'm not even going to try. So that I'm basically opening the door for you to do so.
That's reasonable, Eddie. And I really appreciate you setting me up perfectly so then I have to walk through the door. So I appreciate that. But no, Felix Ojo, big, long offensive tackle from Mansfield, Dallas suburbs. Really toolsy guy, kind of like we talked about with some of these other guys. Long way to go yet. We saw him at the Dallas Under Armour camp. You could see what Bill Beanboat liked. Moves very fluidly, very natural athlete. But he's probably 255, 260. It'll be very interesting to see what he does with Zane Rowe, who is a year younger. Ojo's a class of 2026 guy. So that'll be kind of fun to watch just how that matchup goes. The guy that I think may be the most interesting matchup for Zane Rowe is Papunga Toa Katoa, offensive lineman,
That's
another
a pretty
Dallas
damn
suburbs
good job,
guy.
Josh. Because I had no idea how to tackle that.
Wow.
Yeah, I believe he generally just goes by Toa, so you can go that way if you want to. But he's another guy that we had a chance to see at Dallas Under Armour. I mean, this is I don't think I have to tell anybody this if they just heard me pronounce his name. This is a poly guy, big, powerful. Like he gets his hands on you and you're in some trouble. And I really just kind of want to see him because at camp he moved back and forth between guard and tackle. I'm kind of interested to see where Bill Bedenbaugh is going to want to, he doesn't get too crazy about like, well, I like you as a guard, you're going to play guard, but he'll kind of nudge a guy like, hey, let me see you take some reps against this big defensive tackle and, kind of try to get a look that way. So I think that one's really interesting. The other guy that doesn't have an offer that I think is pretty interesting, and I kind of like him on tape, is Cody Taylor. He came in, I believe, for the Heisman hangout and loved his visit. Just raved about it. Got to meet Brian Bosworth, who, plugged for the site, was on the Family Business earlier this, or I guess late last week. So go back and watch that if you haven't already. But love talking to the Boss. Really enjoyed his time doing that. And just really, I think Oklahoma really clicked for him. And this is a kid from Arkansas. And we've seen Oklahoma land one with Marcus Wimberly. They're chasing another one in Amarian Robinson. So, maybe Oklahoma's trying to get something going in Arkansas.
Josh, how much of these camps, because there's a good chunk of these guys that you said you think could get offered. How big are these camps for these guys to get those offers in Oklahoma looking at him and saying, okay, we do want to offer? Because I know
it's almost like the final step of an eye test, if you will.
Yeah.
I think it's huge because, guys, like you look at it last year, Jonte Newman came to camp, got an offer. Ryan Foje, the big offensive lineman from Florida, Ziari Addison, I think is right. I think Addison's
Didn't
right.
Caden
Anyway,
Jones?
but I think certain coaches are bigger on it. I think Bill Bedenbaugh, it matters a lot because it's not just about, I want to see your skills or what you can do running through some of my drills. He wants to see you come up, show interest, be proactive about picking up that offer. A couple years before, it was Casey Poe, big guy. So Oklahoma's always put some priority on it, but under Brent Venables, there's no question that is something they put a lot of stock in. And Brent talked about it. It was either, Eddie, you could remind me better. It was either during that introductory press conference over in the indoor, or when he kind of really sat down with you all as media, but he talked a lot about, like, we want to wait and offer guys until they show us their interest. They come to campus, they do these things. This is part of that. And so I think that does mean a lot because, guys, a lot of the dudes that already have offers are either coming to camp or just going to come and hang out. Like, I spoke to Caden Jones and Mason James last week. They're both just going to come and hang out just to kind of be around the coaching staff.
Yeah, it seems like nowadays it's either you're coming to earn an offer, or you already have an offer and you're coming to work out, or you're just coming to hang out. I mean, there's a lot of those guys that end up just coming and hanging out.
I mean, Andy Bass is a good example last year where he came and was just
maybe
dominant.
The quintessential example of somebody coming to a camp, performing, and then ultimately getting some type of offer, whether it be a preferred walk-on.
Well, Caden Jones got one
last
year too. So, I mean, and he probably would have got one anyways, but like I just think it's different than what it was under Lincoln Riley for sure in terms of the way that these camps are viewed.
No doubt. On Saturday, Josh, I know that we were talking about mainly guys that were coming in on Thursday. Anybody sticking out to you? And I'm sure that this is going to be a list that continues to, all of a sudden you show up on Saturday morning. It's like, oh, I didn't even know that he was coming.
Oh, sure. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, guys, I can spend, and you know it, I can spend hours. Yesterday, I probably spent 2 or 3 hours trying to compile as many names as I can, from talking to sources to some of it's just checking Twitter and looking over all the guys like, oh, I'll be at camp on this day or that day or whatever. So, you check through a lot of that stuff. And there are still guys that are like, I'm coming if I can find a ride. That came up multiple times for a lot of different guys. But I would say probably the guy on Saturday I'm most interested in watching is Hunter Higgins, defensive lineman from Kansas. He's already been down a couple of times, really likes Oklahoma. And again, we know the track record OU has, especially in any time that Brent Venables has been, any member of Oklahoma's staff. They've really done well in Kansas. I think they want to see that continue. We'll have to see what the model looks like when they're no longer playing KU and KSU. Does that affect the way these kids look at things? Or are they more interested about, okay, I can go play at OU and play LSU and Arkansas and, Texas and Florida and all these other schools? I don't know. We just don't know what that's going to look like. But Hunter Higgins seems very excited. He's going to camp Saturday and seems to be a guy that's, fairly up Oklahoma's board right now, in this very early stage in 2026.
Very good. Looking forward to getting you back up here into the Sooner State. It's always going to be it's a fun week just in terms of the camp stuff, and not only just the camp stuff, but being able to kind of catch up with some of the guys maybe on the team that are out there helping. So it should be a lot of fun here moving forward into the end of the week with the Brent Venables camp coming up Thursday, Saturday this week. Might even get you in studio here at the end of the week this week. So there you go. All right, Josh, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, that was so abrupt.
There was a question. More. There was like a kind of a question mark there. Like, we appreciate it. We'll talk to you next time. How about
that?
Yeah. Very good. For Josh
Beautiful.
and George,
You're graceful in there.
I'm Eddie. We'll see you right back here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube page.